You're listening to Lighthouse Conversations, brought to you by Lighthouse Haven, a spiritual home for your awakening soul. Lighthouse Conversations is a show where awakening souls gather to be inspired, connected, and enlightened. Spiritual spark plug and host Chelly Canales, that's me, will guide you through the twists and turns of your journey to a safe haven where you are finally free to live your best light. Each episode contains a conversation with a guest who has gone through a spiritual awakening, detailing their unique and life-changing experiences in an intimate and candid way. Although everyone's experience is as unique as they are, we all share one common thread. We're all seeking something. So, come join us on this journey and be prepared to leave with resources that will supercharge you into inspired action. Here's today's episode. Welcome back, Awakening Souls. I'm so happy to have you joining me today on the podcast. I would like to introduce you to my friend Jordan Pendleton. She is a real rock star, I would say. I've been inspired by her for a while. One step ahead of me, I guess you could say, in every part of this entrepreneurial journey, seeing her do it, seeing her take off and leave the world of a traditional career to just fly on her own has been really inspirational to me. And I love how she combines the world of finance and the world of spirituality. So you'll get to know a little bit more about Jordan in today's episode. Enjoy. Welcome, Jordan.
Hi, Chelly.
So happy to have you here. So Jordan and I met a few years ago. We were both on the board for a young professionals group, and we were up and coming in our careers. But Jordan and I think, kind of felt at the same time this tug that there was maybe something else in life that we were to be doing. And she has been a great inspiration to me because she took a giant leap way ahead of when I was able to do it. So I want to talk to you a little bit, Jordan, about what that journey was like for you, even starting from before we met, of realizing that your purpose was more than what you perhaps thought it was before.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I am so honored to be here, and I'm excited to have this conversation because it's an important one. And I think, just like we were able to connect on that level, which I don't feel like either of us at the time totally felt supported on this journey. So I just think the work you're doing is so important and needed and just offers inspiration and guidance through this kind of scary time.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I guess it was now about 7 years ago, I started my, career path into financial services. And even before that, I did a yoga teacher training, and I think there was a lot of different things that I was always being pulled between two different worlds. One that was really logical and tactical and very action oriented and results oriented. And then the other one, which got on pause for a long time, was this more spiritual side that I didn't really know existed within me. But right after college, I went straight into a financial planning job, and I was doing all the things, making all the connections, winning all the awards, making the money. And about 3 years into it, I started to feel this really strong internal pull of this isn't your path. And I can't even totally verbalize it, but that internal conflict and grind of what you're doing is not this isn't working anymore. And it was really hard to admit that, and for a long time I avoided it and denied it because I did have all the worldly things. I was on a path to a very quotes successful career, yet I looked ahead and I didn't really want the lives of the people around me. And it all kind of felt what am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? And long story short, it was really out of a place of lack, and I'm not enough and I'm not good enough, and I need to really work for my value, and I need to show up in a certain way, and I need to wear the clothes and be the person that's quote successful. And so a lot of self-discovery and kind of painful going through that process. But then finally deciding to leave that job. And I think that job was just a bigger representation of who I was showing up as in the world, and not really wanting to settle for that anymore, and settle for any, and I'm not saying that financial planning is like a settling job, but just for me at that time, I knew it wasn't aligned. So I left that about 3 years ago and ended up starting my own business within helping millennials understand finances, which then, as I've evolved, that business has evolved a lot, and now helping people find their authentic, like really connecting with their authentic selves and what they really value, and aligning their money to that, because money is, I keep coming back to the money conversation as much as I want to avoid it and run away from it. It keeps pulling me back in, and I think there's a lot of work to be done in the space.
So that's so interesting, because I noticed that spirituality is not something that you find very commonly in the world of finance. There are very specific ways of measuring success that are not necessarily in alignment with the things you were just talking about. So I'm curious how it was ever received, if you spoke up for that, or if you didn't feel safe speaking up for that at the time, because that's not what the culture supported.
I didn't feel totally safe or supported to have those types of conversations given the environment that I was in. So there was a ton of like internal back and forth, and like, how do I, and attempting to integrate some of these things into my business, but having ultimately this, like, it might have been a self-held limiting belief, or culturally just where I was at the time, being like, this is not, like, this doesn't belong in this conversation. So I didn't feel like I belonged in the conversation either. And so I think that's ultimately what led me to leaving, so that I could unpack and explore what that even was, because there was so much like gray area and like kind of scariness and darkness around what would that actually even look like, and is that even possible? Like, can we actually combine a spiritual, emotional, mental conversation with the logic and tactic of the financial realm? So it was a lot of it was scary to think about that, because I didn't know anybody doing that at the time.
Right. And that's what you're hoping to reconcile with your business right now. That's what you're doing actively. So I commend you for facing that fear and saying, you know what, yes, that's scary, but this is on my terms, and I would like to join the two together to see what kind of results we can get. And I want to talk more about that in a minute, more about your current role. But I want to go back just a bit. I hear this theme a lot. I felt it so strongly myself, of feeling like, you know, there's a jelly-shaped peg that doesn't fit into a round hole of this job. And how many people I see more and more are coming to that realization. There's like a shift in the culture that's happening, that, you know, everybody has very unique gifts and talents, and they have their own view of the world. And if it doesn't reconcile with who they are as a person, it's very hard to spend so many hours a day somewhere, the most hours of the day that you spend anywhere, in a place that isn't you. You can't be you everywhere you go. So it is a common thing that happens when people start to go through this awakening process. It's realizing that the structures that I previously operated by may not be the truth, or may not be my truth. Are you noticing people around you, after they've seen you activate, are coming to their own conclusions about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And as my spiritual and like personal evolution has continued, I've seen more and more too of like you have to go through somewhat of a rebirth, like a rebirthing time. And sometimes it's not possible or healthy to do it within the confines or the structure in which your old self, or maybe even like a part of like your current self, has been operating. And so, yeah, I've seen a lot of people coming like, you know, this structure isn't really working for me and where I'm at right now. I've also seen that as I've developed and strengthened, that it's so much less about what you're doing as it is how you're doing it and how you're showing up. But there is like this really awkward time where you're like shedding these old layers, and then there's people around you, people, companies, things that like viewed you one way, and you're now kind of leaving that behind, and it feels really big and scary to the person going through it of
Yes.
how do I show up and be this more authentic and real version of myself. But then there's all these other factors that make it really challenging and tough. But I also think there's so much to learn in that, like in that space of being really uncomfortable and like learning to really be yourself around people, because people that you don't think want you to be yourself. So it's an interesting like mind game for sure.
So true. And it's like you said, it's a rebirth. It's the butterfly from the cocoon. It's the shedding of the skin. And it's so exposing. I mean, I remember when I announced my first retreat as a spiritual retreat, I hyperventilated and I hesitated, and I was up all night wondering, should I do this? Should I do this? Because everyone's going to judge me. They're used to seeing me a certain way, and now they're like, who are you all of a sudden? And the truth is, once I did it, there was so much love and support. So I think a lot of those restraints we do put on ourselves, I think we do have those limiting beliefs that did come from somewhere. There was a time where it wasn't safe to be out spiritually. So I can totally get that. As you were going through this process of rebirth, I'd love to know what helped you through it. I know yoga is a part of your life and is a part of your life. Are there any other activities or any books or things that were just like life rafts to you as you navigated these new waters?
Oh man, I think it would, if I had to really boil it all down, it's community.
Yes.
And other people that are walking a similar path that can see you through all the mess and the chaos and the shit that you feel like you're going through and still love you anyways. And because at times there's definitely been times where I have completely lost my sense of self like through this journey, which is interesting because you feel like you're coming into yourself also. So it's this weird paradox, but like people that really reflect your true self and your true value back to you, I don't think I could have done this without like a few core really solid friends. And so I know that that's easier said than done, and not everybody has that support, but finding some community that you feel like quotes gets you. Yes. And like the phase that you're at, I just, above and beyond any tools, resources, etc., I would say community.
That's huge, because it can be extremely alienating and a lonely time during an awakening process. I know I've experienced that. And I've also wanted some alone time during that as well, where you start to shift and you realize maybe certain people or certain groups you were spending time with didn't reflect back that person that you wanted to be. So it really is a treasure. It really is a gift when you find people who get you and can walk you through that. Did they understand specifically what you were going through, or was it just like, she's going through something, I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to support her and love her and be there for her?
A little bit of both. Like I would say there's different levels of people who got it and like really understood. There were a couple of really core, like two really core friends of mine that I feel like maybe they didn't understand exactly, but they had either been through this process themselves or were walking through it. So it wasn't so much of like the actual expression of whatever was going on, but it was more like, I get like your pain, I see your pain and your hurt, and like, or I see your joy. And like, they were just like there and unconditional in their support, which makes you feel seen and known and like really supported and loved.
Gosh, feeling seen, supported, and loved. Don't we all want that? And sometimes that's so hard to come by. I've had that feeling of walking around through life wondering if I'm actually there. So
Mhm.
it's a true gift to have people witness you. And I hope to be that for other people as well, because it's probably the top thing you can do for another person when they're going through something. So I'm so glad you had that. As you
Yeah,
were
and
going through
something to
this.
add there is
Yeah.
like I think I had a lot of resistance, and it's still something that I struggle with, like in more of the ego realm of like actually receiving support.
Yes. Oh,
But
yes.
I think that like every piece of this has something, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the people that are around us have something beautiful to teach us,
Mm.
even if it sucks and it's a huge blow to your ego. Because just because you're going through a spiritual awakening doesn't mean you don't still have an ego or thoughts or
Oh,
judgment.
for sure.
So it's I know I kind of got a little on my high horse like early on, because I was like, oh, I'm like gone through this like huge transformation and I'm better, or like I know more, or so it's been a really humbling, grounding experience. And with your willingness to actually receive that support and let yourself be seen is a whole set of work in and of itself.
Especially because you're such a strong person and you show up for other people in a really big way. So having to humble yourself and say, I need help, I need guidance, I need something, and actually taking it with grace instead of being embarrassed by it or being, shamed by it. It's a really huge life lesson and a really big thing that I think many people who are going through this process deal with. And it's totally okay, that whole yes, look at me, I'm so awakened moment, like, so I think everybody at some point goes through that, why is everyone else asleep? Well, look at me doing all the work over here. Well, see, the second your ego says that, you're like, thank you, ego. Thank you for chiming in. I appreciate the input. Now go back to to where you were before. I don't need this right now. So it's just
Totally.
about lovingly acknowledging it and then swiftly sending those judging thoughts away.
Yeah, and I think that was something early on that I misunderstood about this like path that we're walking, is that like you get there, or like you ever arrive. And I know that that's like super cliche of like you never arrive and you never, but like in my mind you get there at some point. And maybe that's just like a lot of conditioning, or like thinking that like someday I will get there. And so I thought like, oh, this whole new awakening, but really it's just the start of a crazy awesome journey. And like there's still so much to learn, and there's like humbling and exciting and joyous, and like it's, for me, yeah, there's been a lot of different levels and layers and things to go through. And it just, that initial kind of spark wasn't it that maybe like that it was.
You put that so beautifully, because maybe the expectation is like, yes, I did it, you guys. I'm awake. Congratulations to me. That's not how it goes. It's like when I jumped off the cliff of my life last year, leaving my job, starting on this journey. I was like, yeah, I jumped off that cliff. And then I looked, two steps ahead of me and I was like, oh my God, there's another cliff. And then I jumped off that one.
Again.
And then I realized it's never ending. You're always going to be stretching yourself if you're going to grow, if you're going to expand, if you're going to be greater in awareness than you were before. It doesn't stop.
It never does. I think letting go of that was a big leap, because we are taught that we are in control and that we can control and that there are things to control, but really there's not a lot we can control, and there's still so many aspects and angles and things that of like that realm of like feeling like you're in control or needing control of whatever is happening. Like that's the leap that you're talking about, and it's so true.
Right. And you've learned so many amazing things going through this process. It's just such a joy for me to hear you speak about it, knowing kind of where you began, which was already in a great place, and seeing where you are now. So I'm excited to see even more what you're getting into. And I want to talk about your work right now, because these principles, these lessons, all of this, you work with in terms of finance, and you have a specific niche you work with as well. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it's been like a very much evolving topic and niche, but like if I really look at it, it's all been the same. Like if I boil down like all the people that I've gotten to work with over the last couple of years, like it's been a pretty particular subset of people, but mostly right now the work I'm doing is mostly with couples that can't get on the same page about money, that they've struggled to align their life, their decisions, they maybe don't even know like their values or what it is that they really even want money for. And so really helping them to pause on a lot of those unproductive conversations that have maybe been circulating, and get out of the weeds for a second and look at the bigger picture of like, well, who are you and where do you really want to go, and where is it that as a couple you get really stopped? And I do this with individuals as well, but right now it's seeming to be a lot of couple work and helping people really see the bigger picture of why they're wanting money in the first place. Because I've noticed and seen, and just like culturally, that, and I actually just wrote an article about this, but that wealth and money is the end game. Like that we just really want more and more money, like that there's never enough money, and that's how you become wealthy, is you just have a lot of money or a lot of things or a lot of houses or nice stuff. But I think if we really look at humans and what money was originally designed for, it's a vehicle, or it's a tool, it's like a fuel in the vehicle. It's not actually like meant to be driving the car itself. And so helping people really take back the steering wheel and come alive again, and stop just going along with the emotions of, or just with whatever they're feeling is expected, or that is like societally approved of. That like you gotta like carve your own path. And especially as couples, like nobody really, like they don't really do like premarital counseling really as much anymore. And so nobody really sits you down and goes like, what are your shared values, and what is your vision for your life? Like I think the point of being married or in partnership with somebody is to do more together than you could apart, and to be your best selves together, and hopefully make an impact while you're doing it, and make an impact on your family, whatever that looks like for you. And so it's helping people find that authentic path and truth with money. And money touches every area of life. So it's just, and for me, it's a cool entry point.
That's incredible. I think that there's so much that needs to be done in that realm. It's hard to, I guess, remove these blocks or these beliefs that have been built upon us from birth, right? Our families had certain ideas about money, and then you meet someone else and their family had a certain idea about money. And if those things haven't been reconciled within themselves, that can certainly lead to, like, I don't even know what beliefs are mine anymore. So that's pretty tremendous that you take the time to drill through that and get people on a similar path. So what an awesome idea. My question for you is, like, what do you think is money's role in spirituality?
I think just like anything that we deal with in the external, like everything has an energy, and everything that you're interacting with has an energy. And money is interesting because it's not a person. It doesn't have a voice. It's this very arbitrary thing. And so it is what you make of it. And so I think that there's so much in the spiritual realm to learn about and through money and our relationship with it. But I think it's just ultimately an energetic like force that either is, and it just represents so much about how you do everything else in your life as well. And so the more we reclaim our power and we stand in that authentic truth, the more our relationship with money is allowed to transform and evolve, and that relationship to it and with it gets charged in certain different ways. So it's kind of I could probably talk a lot longer and in more depth about that. But yeah, it's a kind of interesting. For me, it's ever fascinating because we're all like required essentially as a part of this world right now to like be in contact with it. So it's how do you want to show up with it, and what is it that you want to create with it? I think it is like a creative force.
I love that.
Power.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think we could talk about this forever and ever. I know we only have a certain amount of time though, but I think you summed that up really quite beautifully. And one other spiritual money thing I wanted to bring up is how I've noticed in the spiritual community how hard it is for people to feel good about charging for their services. Because if you're a spiritual person, then you cannot be making money because that's not moral, that's not holy, that's not what good people do, you know, is kind of the impression that's out there. And it kind of hangs over a lot of healers and, you know, spiritual workers, things along those lines. Do you have any advice for shifting that mindset?
Yes. Yeah, I think there's a lot. Well, it's all looking at as well, like where did those beliefs really come from? And where's the root of that, and how is it that we view money in every other realm? Because a lot of times when we're making ourselves wrong for receiving money, it's because we feel wrong about the other ways that it's being handled in the world. Like, you know, greedy corporate people like making money, like that feels bad. Like if they're doing things to harm the environment or harm people or not really valuing their employees, or there's like grimy not goodness like wrapped up in whatever it is you're viewing and feeling about money. And I think that like that is the pendulum that we play on a little bit of, well, I'm either corporate and greedy and I'm not like downing on corporations, but just like I think a lot of times spiritual people come from a corporate background as well, or they have some touch or understanding, or they've experienced something that has like made money and making a lot of money not a good thing, or like not feel good. Right. And so then we go and we make that wrong, which then ultimately holds us to that belief. And then therefore us making money like is wrong, is bad. And so it's where does that belief really come from, and does it belong in the context anymore? Because I believe that it is our like spiritual right and evolution, like a piece of the evolution of our spirituality to receive money for the healing of others. Because think of like the power that we can have, not power because it's not a power struggle, but like as you become more and more yourself and you allow yourself to collect money in exchange for those services, the more good we can do in the world and more we have the ability to shift and change and evolve everything that we come in contact with. So I think that it's easy to keep yourself stuck based on like saying X, Y, and Z, or like, this is not good, it's usually not, doesn't have anything to do with money itself. It's how you've seen other people handle it, or even yourself. Like, I had to work through a lot of that myself. Like, I don't feel like I was in alignment when I made a lot of my money earlier on in my 20s, and like, I had to heal from that and like forgive myself and say it doesn't have to be done that way, and that when you do make money and it's aligned, like, you don't, it feels right. Like, it doesn't feel grimy, it doesn't feel gross. And that, like, that just allows me that much more to say, to go to help more people and spread a message, and like, there's not what's wrong with that.
Yeah, wow, that's a great answer. And I think that there is definitely a shift that's happening where people are starting to realize that those who do have the ability to help and to heal should be better compensated, or that it shouldn't be a negative thing for them to be compensated for that kind of work. And I think the more we talk about it, just like we are right now, the more it's going to implant in people's consciousness that it's a good thing. I mean, I think about teachers, even I think about nurses, I think about healers. There's so many professions out there where people put their heart and souls into something, and it's almost like it's a career of service, right? But can you imagine what this world would be like if those who provided that service were taken care of beautifully? You know, they had all the money that they needed and had their own self-care. I mean, I feel like we can get there, and I hope that we can get there.
Yeah, and I think it's really it all comes down to intention. And are you doing and executing out of a place of lack or a place of sufficiency? Are you coming from a place of, I don't have enough and I need more money and I need you to give me money so I can be better off? That doesn't feel good, at least to me. Or are you trusting that there is enough and that you're supported? Because I think money, when we're in good relationship with it, it is there to support us. Think about Mother Teresa. Like, the woman never collected $1 for anything in her, like, for an actual service, yet she was one of like the wealthiest women like ever, because she had created so much, and like, it was this like support and this like feeling of I'm good enough, I'm whole enough. She just like radiated that, and like, look at the impact she made. And so it's sometimes not even like about the money, it's where it's coming from. It's the place within you that it is coming from.
The mindset that there's a shift in value of yourself is what it sounds like.
Yeah, like, do you really value yourself? Do you need this client to fulfill a need of yours? Or is it just an extension? Because like, is it just an extension of you just feeling like good in who you are, which is, I think, the core of the work of like reminding ourselves of sufficiency, and that we are taken care of, and that we are good enough, and we are supported.
And do you share this type of dialogue with your clients? Do you talk about value? Do you talk about what you just said in terms of your coaching sessions?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's really getting to, because I think whether it's in money, relationships, or health, it all stems off of a core set of limiting or foundational belief. And so helping people really uncover what that sounds like for them and where it came from, and some understanding and awakening around like what it is, what's your real truth, and then what is it that like these lies or masks or things we've taken on as a form of protection and to keep ourselves safe, but ultimately that's not serving us anymore. And so that's the core of the work that I do, that then bleeds into, well, how does that actually show up in your money? And how do we want to, what does that look like to move into that place of enoughness,
Right.
with money, and how do we interact with money from that place?
Yes. And I know that this is a process and it takes several sessions, it takes deep work. But if you were to give one piece of advice in terms of like getting in alignment with your values so that money can flow not from a place of need or lack, would you have any suggestions?
Yes. I think awareness is key. So even just like one really simple thing that I have my clients do in the first 30 days that we work together is carry around a little journal, or however you want to do it. You can do it on your computer too, but tracking everything, like everything that's coming in and out of your bank account, and not to like say spend less or make more or anything, but really just to see what comes up as you interact with money, and like what emotions, feelings, thoughts are actually going through, because 95% of what we do with money and everything is subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So just starting to shine some light in the darkness, which can feel that way when we look at things that are going on in our subconscious, and just non-judgmentally looking at the actual behavior that's going on, because I think it can tell a pretty awesome, crazy, cool story, just to start seeing what's actually going on as I interact with money. We avoid it so hardcore. It's like one of the least desired, talked about topics in our culture. So,
Well, you're doing a great service by bringing it to the forefront and talking about it in the way that you do. I know you're changing lives every day by following your own heart. So I'm very proud of you for that. If people listening would like to know more about your work, how can they find you?
yeah, I think the best way right now is on social media outlets. Either like there's a lot of information on my LinkedIn profile, Jordan Youngblade Pendleton. And then Facebook and Instagram, I'm also on there to connect with me. But yeah, if anybody's just interested in having a conversation, I do offer a free 20-minute, just let's hop on the phone and see where you're at and see if there's anything I can help with.
That's so great, Jordan. And I really like following your social media because you are very transparent about your journey and you like to post things that I find very inspirational. You have this realness about you. So I would definitely suggest following Jordan's accounts. And I am just so delighted to know you and so thankful for the way you're showing up in the world.
Thank you, Shelley. And I just had one other thing come to mind too, of like you had mentioned a resource or anything. There's a
Yeah.
book called The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. And it literally like flipped my brain upside down of how I think about money. And I only read it like last year, but it was a game changer for me. So that book for sure.
That's fantastic. I actually have heard that name rattle around a few times, and I just got a little tingle in my body when you said it, and it made me realize now's the time to read it. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, it's a good one. Definitely makes you look at money and the way we interact with it very differently. And it's not numbers driven at all. It's much more in the spiritual and mental, emotional side of things. So
amazing.
Not to intimidate anybody.
Yeah, because it can be. Absolutely. It's one of the most loaded topics out there. So I like it when people talk about it in a way that feels more free, feels easier, feels not so intimidating. And that is a gift. That's a gift that we have access to a resource like that.
Totally. I always say, like, don't start with the numbers. Do not start with the numbers, because it's like too much. And even for me, because this all came out of like my own relationship issues with money and success and stuff. So yeah, don't start with the numbers, like if that is too intimidating, but start somewhere.
Gosh, I truly believe that the people who have really gone through it, who have sat through this journey, are the best teachers in this subject, because you can speak from a place of experience, and that you definitely have.
Oh, thanks, Shelley. I'm
Thank you so much.
so grateful to be on.
Oh,
Thanks for doing the work you do in the world.
Thank you. And I'm just so glad to have allies like you through this process and a community that includes you. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to Lighthouse Conversations. If this show resonates with you, it would mean so much to have you rate, review, and share. Don't forget to follow us at chellycanales.com and on social media.